Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to bring my motion before the House. As you know, Speaker, this will be the first hour of discussion on the motion that you just read. If plans go accordingly, early in the new year, there should be an opportunity for the second hour and then hopefully not long after that an actual vote. My reason in bringing this motion forward is not because I've suddenly become delusional and believe that we can muster a majority on our side to make what we want happen, although I wish we could, and with optimism look forward to the next election when we may have the opportunity to do that, and it won't be just motions, it'll actually be bills that make a difference for the people of my community of Hamilton and the rest of Canada. But we're going to do everything we can in this struggle to make sure that at the very least the government is not allowed to have this item to just quietly slip away, because what's at stake is just too important. Canadians know, Speaker, that Hamilton is steel town. It's changing now if you look at the employment where most of the jobs are, but nonetheless, for the time being, and certainly in our proud history, we are steel town. And it was known as the home of Stelco and Dofasco. And for the most part, things went along with some give and take fairly good for the community. And then all of a sudden, in 2007, the government approved the takeover of Stelco by U.S. Steel, and it's been darkness ever since. I want to read into the record, if you'll allow me, Speaker, an extract from the Investment Canada Act, so we understand exactly what was the government's responsibility in this regard. And the Investment Canada Act says in part the following: the purposes of this Act are to provide for the review of significant investments in Canada by non-Canadians in a manner that encourages investment, economic growth, and employment opportunities in Canada. Speaker, the takeover of Stelco by U.S. Steel has been anything but a net benefit to my community and the citizens that are there and the smaller businesses that support that corporation. There's no net benefit, not when the corporation, when one of their earliest acts is to lock out the workers. They lock them out. Not a strike, a lockout. And why do they lock them out? So they can attack their pension plan. That alone, in my view, warrants this government, the current government, this government must give the people of Hamilton an apology for that alone. I see my friend over there wants me to quiet down. You can tell that it's not his constituents and their pensions, because I'll tell you, the last thing that the people at home in my community want is for me to be quiet on this issue. They want noise, they want attention, and they want action. And that's why this motion is here. And the importance of this issue is not going to be lost. Whether we win or not ultimately remains to be seen, but we're not going to lose this. And so that's why I put in here that given it's the government's responsibility, their sacred responsibility, to review potential foreign takeovers to ensure that exactly what happened in Hamilton with U.S. Steel doesn't happen. It's not supposed to happen. That's the responsibility of the federal government when they review these kind of buyouts under this legislation. They let Canada down, they let Hamilton down, and they certainly let the workers and the pensioners of Stelco and U.S. Steel down completely, not to mention the city of Hamilton. And I'll come to that in a moment. The other thing my motion asks for is that the secret deal that got U.S. Steel out of court for not honoring their first set of commitments needs to be made public. And lest, Speaker, the government think that they can just kind of brush that off as, oh, it's just the opposition, they're like that, or, oh, that's just Rolf Gerstenberger, the president, 1005. He just asked those kinds of things. That's those kind of folks. Not the case. Not the case. Let me put on the record a letter in part dated September 24th this year to the Federal Minister of Industry from the Provincial Economic Development Minister, Mr. Brad Dougherty, and he says in part in his letter to the Minister of Industry, as the CCAA process continues, it would be helpful for all parties to better understand the details of the 2011 settlement between the Government of Canada and U.S. Steel Corporation related to the company's Investment Canada Act obligations and potential implications for Ontario and Hamilton. We fully recognize that there may be legal challenges to releasing commercially sensitive information. However, it would be helpful for all parties if the federal government could share this information with all levels of government to ensure that we are all well informed. Anything you can do to assist in this matter would be most appreciated, end quote. Well, I'm doing what I can to try to assist. I sure hope the minister's listening. But again, I said it was more than just a few voices in Hamilton or in Ontario. City Council, Hamilton City Council has a special committee on this issue, on the steel industry, and they're very seized of this issue. Councillor Scott Duvall, up until the new council, I don't know about the new one to happen, but up until now, Councillor Duvall has been the chair of this, and by the way, he's a steel worker himself, certainly understands the issues. They've been calling for this information because the impact on Hamilton's revenue is huge. Millions and millions of dollars stand to be lost if this corporation closes, and those jobs are lost. And the city's quite worried because, like every other older city, they've got all kinds of challenges already without suddenly having millions of dollars of tax revenue being taken away. And in terms of the broader community, the Hamilton Spectator on September the 26th, just within the last couple of months, September 26, 2014, under the heading of The Spectator's View, Ottawa should come clean on U.S. Steel deal. They say, is it possible the federal government will heed the growing calls for it to lift the veil of secrecy covering the deal it struck with U.S. Steel back in 2011? The most recent demand for that comes from Ontario's Economic Development Minister, Brad Dougherty, who wants the secrecy to end in order to protect provincial interests. It's a reasonable demand. The chronology is as follows. U.S. Steel bought Stelco in 2007 and, amid foreign ownership concerns, made promises around minimum employment and production. Not long after, it idled production in spite of its commitments. The federal government sued to enforce the promises and won a preliminary round. But suddenly, but suddenly in 2011, if anybody wonders, it's the government dropped this suit in exchange for new commitments that have not been kept. Now that U.S. Steel aims to sell its Hamilton operations and pull out of Canada, the agreement should be made public. There may be legitimate reasons to redact some portions, but not at the expense of the truth. U.S. steelworkers, pensioners, and the citizens of Hamilton deserve to know what our government agreed to and why it never enforced the agreement, not to mention what it plans to do now. And they signed their editorials, and that one was signed by Mr. Howard Elliott. And I read that, Speaker, to point out that this is not, again, just the opposition raising an issue and trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. This is already a mountain. This is huge. So my motion, so far I've addressed the fact, Speaker, that it calls for an apology because in our view, the government, the federal government, the Conservative federal government has let Hamilton down and let the workers and pensioners at U.S. Steel Stelco down completely. And we demand and deserve an apology for that incredibly bad decision. Next, the government owes it to the people of Hamilton the pensioners, the workers, and the rest of this country to make public the deal that got U.S. Steel out of court. Remember, they were in court. The government was winning, holding them to account on their first round of promises. And what got U.S. Steel out of court and out of trouble was this deal. But what's in the deal? It's at the heart of everything. What commitments were made, and are those commitments being honored? And in the breach of those, what happens? We don't know. We don't know. And that's why those of us that are local MPs are raising the issue. That's why I'm putting this motion here that's in front of us. That's why Hamilton City Council has time and time again called for the government to release this information. And now the provincial government has also said that they believe that this information needs to be made public. So that deals with the first two issues. The last one is the one that strikes at the human part, at the human level. It calls for amendments to the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act and the Company Creditors Arrangement Act so that in the case of a bankruptcy, unlike right now, where workers' pensions are at the bottom of the list of those to be paid out from whatever assets remain in a bankruptcy. That's wrong. It's wrong, Mr. Speaker. And here's why. Corporations, companies, they can withstand the financial hit of one of their suppliers or one of their clients going bust a lot more than a steelworker that's worked 30, 40, 45 years and knew at the end of that grinding life, and anybody who's ever worked in a factory will know and can imagine what decades and decades and decades of going into that plant are like. To then find out that the pension that you were guaranteed, the wages that you said, I won't take now every hour in my pay, I want it to go into a fund that will accumulate over the pay periods and over the months and years and decades so that I've got a little bit of a retirement. And I can live in dignity and enjoy whatever remaining years I have living a decent retirement. Not to mention those pensioners that have already been retired for 10 or 20 years, and now they face the prospect of their income being cut by what, 20, 30, 50% more? I know what would happen in this place if somebody said that MPs should get 50% less than they get right now. Can you imagine what it's like, how frightening it is for pensioners in Hamilton that have worked at Stelco all those years, and they're either about to go on pension or they're on pension, and it's now in jeopardy. Speaker, you can't go and relive the 30 years. You can't fix that problem. When you're a company, you've got some means to plan for the future, to do things. But when you're just a working person who's put their whole life into a company and they tell you the pension money is gone, what do? It's terrifying. And so this motion is to draw attention to what needs to be done. It's to draw attention to how wrong and shamefully the people in Hamilton have been treated. And it's to call on the government to do the right thing. Apologize for what has happened to our community and our citizens. Make the information public. The government doesn't own it. And lastly, change the legislation to protect our pensioners, because if we don't step in and protect them, you can see pretty clearly U.S. Steel and others, they're not going to do it. So if we don't do it, who? Who? The people in Hamilton, those steel workers, are looking to this place to help them. Approving this motion and following what it asked for would go a long way to bring dignity, respect, and fairness to the people of Hamilton and the workers and pensioners of Stelco and U.S. Steel, who deserve to be treated better than the way they've been treated at the hands of this government. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank